This is the small game we will be developing with uNode by the end of this video. The goal is to take a journey through making something with uNode, rather than the basics of visual scripting and Unity itself, so you'll be expected to have some familiarity with them beforehand. This is using some art provided by Kenny, and I will have a link to download the assets in the description of the video itself. So what we're going to start with is the character so that we can get them jumping. So we'll name this here character control. We'll be using a uNode runtime for this. So I'm not going to be going through all the hows and whys of what we're doing. I'm trying to just take you through a large range of what uNode has available to you to give you some just broad experience with it. So what we're going to be doing here is setting up some variables. So we'll want a jump strength so that we can put how high our character is going to jump, and we'll want a bool to test if they're on the ground so that you can only jump while you're on the ground, and we'll want a reference to said ground and a reference to the animator on the character so that we can set them to their jump animation when they jump. So that'll be character anim. So now we'll add the Unity event update so that we can check for the input in the update frame set. So we'll be using left click or spacebar to jump. So you can right click to add a node in uNode, and we want to search for input, and then right click on that to go deeper into the branch, and we will be getting we'll be getting key down. I'm looking for space, and then we'll be also getting the mouse button down, and 0 is the left click. So if either of those are pressed, then we'll be jumping. So we're just going to get an OR. So if either of those are registered as true, then you'll jump. So then we can go out of here and get the if there. Alternatively, we can press space to type some stuff quickly like this and just put it in there. So now we'll add the function for jump, and that will happen when those are true. And now that we've sort of made this graph, we can right click anywhere on the graph and click on place fit nodes, and that will neaten everything up nicely for you. So now in our jump, we will be getting this, which is a reference to this. But if we get the game object from that, then that will be a reference to the game object that this script will be attached to. So in this case, that would be the character. And we right click in that so that we can get the rigid body. We can get component on that game object, which will be the rigid body. So it's type builder, so select, and then that will bring this out. So now I can go to the rigid body and add the force we need, which will be this one here, so that we can specifically leave the X and Z 0 and just grab the jump strength and throw that into Y, which in our case will be 1000. then we'll just attach that and fit that. And so we should be jumping now with either of those pressed. So our next step is the actual animation. So to do that, we need to, on the character, start setting some of these references. So in the scene, we need the ground, which is the block, and the animator, which is going to be on this component here. Those don't need. And so we will be starting on the ground, so of course we'd like for that to start as on. But once we jump, we'll be setting that to off, because it'll be in the air. And I've already set up with the scene that will be in the description for you to download, the assets, the transitions that we need. So there will be a jump and a fall that will trigger on the character animation. So we just need to set trigger and jump. And now when the character falls, which will be when it collides with the ground. So that's on the collision. We'll be setting them to have landed. So, but first we're going to get the collision with the ground, which is, you can get that from the collision info, which is a parameter in here. So we'll just add the node collision info and then get the collision and then right click to then find the game object of the collision and compare that. Equals game object. So that equals the ground. Then we'll be setting that to true. Because it will have landed back on the ground. And so now we're going to jump and make sure that you can only jump if you are actually still on the ground. So if you are on the ground, that's when you're allowed to jump. So now we should be able to have our character jump, and even if we click it won't jump until it's fallen on the ground, except that isn't working because we can test this here in our script because this is running live. The collision block, this is probably not correct. I'm not sure if that's the right. Compare equals. Well, another alternative to the equals list, we can just get if equals, and that will get objects. So that should be the comparison we actually need. Hopefully. I've only made this 10 times. Why would I make a mistake? Looks like it's working. Yep. So you can't jump while it's in the air, but the animation isn't falling yet. So for that, we're going to, if we were to have that change back to its idle after it lands on the ground, that's going to look pretty awkward. So the character has a separate to its collider, it has the trigger as well. So we can find them separately in here with an on collider, or rather on trigger, enter. And for that, we can just copy most of this. And by most of this, I mean some of this. Actually, not even that. But paste it here, and then we will be getting from here the collider info. And the collider object, similar to the collision object. So the collider and the game object from that. And reference and checking that. So now we can just, instead of making them jump, we'll make them fall. And so hopefully this will be it completed. So here we see them jump, and that happens because we have not checked that they are actually in the air when their trigger happens. So we need to make sure that they're actually in the air. So that would be a if here. If this is actually false. This is looking like a mess, and so every time I just constantly use placefit nodes to fix everything up, so it looks like I've been neat. So this should be all good now. Yep, so now he jumps, lands back, and is back in the idle. So now that we've got all that running, what we want to actually do is have the rope, which in this case is a fence, because that was the closest thing I could find in the available art assets to use as a rope alternative. In this case, we will be making a script. So this is an example of being able to pass a script into uNode. So this is the rotate around script. I just found this by searching for rotate around, and Unity had an example available. So I can just double click on that. And this is the script that I found on the Unity website. Paste that, save, and then back in Unity. You will, to be able to pass this, you will need to have gone into uNode, into the welcome and add-ons, and click on this and import the parser. I already have that, so once you've done that, you just have the C# parser, drag in any script, and you'll be able to pass it into a graph. So you've got all this visual stuff, which is nicer for some people, including me, and you'll be able to then update this and compile it back into the script to use on an object, because we are going to want to make changes to this example script. We want this to be the vector right, so that it rotates around in the right direction, which is the right direction. And we also want to change the way this works. So in the game, there will be the starting speed, and you'll be able to, it increases over time. So that is to give you more challenge, and it's not just the same speed the entire time, just to add a bit a bit of spice to a very simple game. So for this, we're going to add some more variables. So we want our start speed, our bonus speed, and you can also just right click and duplicate to add growth speed. Our start speed is going to be 120. Our growth speed, which is the speed it will increase by, is 10. And we'll just be adding that in the bonus speed, because the growth speed is going to be added to the bonus speed over time. So for this, we can just do plus add. That's what we want, to just add these two values together. And put that in there. And so what we're going to be doing now is creating some functions to actually make this increase. So we will be adding the awake step. We will be setting up a coroutine. So a coroutine is going to allow us to wait for a certain amount of time before making a function. So this way we can add the growth speed to the bonus speed every 2 seconds. So we'll start coroutine, and that we'll choose the enumerator because we'll be making that, and that will be a new function, speed up, and we need to change the return type from void to enumerator to be able to do this. And so in the enumerator, we will be making this repeat every 2 seconds with a repeater. And you click on that to make sure that you're setting this to repeat forever, so that it will continue repeating every 2 seconds and not just the first 2 seconds. Then we'll be adding a wait for 2 seconds, and we'll be simply setting the bonus speed to we can actually do this. So we can get the bonus speed, get the growth speed, and then just plus equals here. So it will set this first value to be it plus the second value, which is a nice shortcut. It can take 2 seconds to move that node, so I just place speed everything. It's much faster. But now back in awake, now that we have our enumerator set up, we can make this, bringing this in here, set that up, and it will be getting it. It'll be getting the enumerator from this. And so now, as long as everything is hopefully working, we can compile this back into the script. And so this will update so that we now have our new script that was started from a just script we got off the internet from Unity. You can also look at the script here in preview, and you can click anywhere in here and it'll take you to that location in the graph, which is nice. So attach that to our jump rope. this is a problem because, forgot to rename their name to rotate around. So you need to match the name of the class and the name of the script. So now it should be working. I totally did that just in this demonstration. The target to rotate around, it will be itself. And so now it should be rotating around the character. And now we can dodge it. And you can see the speed increases, and that will increase the speed that the rope goes around the character that we need to jump over. So that's well and good, but now we need a reason to jump over it. So we're going to start setting up the score with our game manager. So with this, we will be creating from scratch a new uNode class. Which will be game manager. So you need to make sure, just like before, that we have the same name in here, game manager. And in the game manager, we will be using, in the game manager here, we'll be using properties. So for properties, we are going to be using an int, which will be our score. Now, something with properties is we need to have a property name, in this case score, and a separate variable that will be score with an underscore at the start of that. That is private, because the entire point of this, is that we want this is going to be an example of setting a value and then having something happen when that value is set, which is what properties can do for you, because the properties, we will be adding a setter and a getter, but we need a separate value here to be actually setting and getting from, because otherwise it will just repeat. If the get gets itself, then it's getting and getting and getting and getting, and that just loops infinitely, and that's not anything you want ever to happen. So in the getter, we will be getting the score, the private score here, variable, and returning that. Here. And then in the setter, this is where we set up stuff to happen. So we will be getting in this case, in the setter, we get a value, and this is the values sent to the set when it's set. That will be, we'll be setting the private score that won't be seen in our object to the value, and then we'll be acting on this value that we get to set this score on the screen to our increased score. And something that's reminding us of here is no start is assigned. So if there's no start in the pre-made graph, like in the case of these setters and getters, you need to actually set something as the start. So that's basically the entry point for the function or whatever graph is being used. So in here I was setting that as the start. So we will need a variable here that will be our text object in the scene to set the text. But to get the text object, we need to, in this case, add a new namespace, which will be Unity Engine UI. Now it's important that it's Engine UI and not Editor UI, because that's a different namespace. That can be easy to mix up. So now that we've got that namespace, we can add a text object from Unity Engine UI. So that'll be our score text, which we'll be getting and setting the text value of. So we'll get the text and then we'll set that value to the value that we're getting from here. So we can convert that automatically into the string that we need to set it. And then it's important to remember at the end of this, we need to return so that this finishes its functionality. And that should be our game manager setup. So we'll compile that, and something I often forget is when we're trying to attach something to something else, we need to make sure that this is a mono behavior. You learn that after making the game 10 times. So now this game manager we can attach to our empty game object in the scene that we have ready for it, and make sure to actually get our text object that we will be setting the text of here. And then back in our character, we need to get a reference to this new class, the game manager, so that we can set that score value. So on our character, we'll make sure to drag in the game manager so that we know who we're sending it to, and then in the trigger, we'll be setting up a new object. So currently we have the ground, but what we want now is to actually test the rope to be able to see that when we have jumped just early enough so that that trigger interacts with the rope, and while we're off the ground, that it will increase the score. So now we're going to test all this again. Over here. If you hold Shift and Alt, you can just drag and slice through stuff like that, which is very cool. So after we've checked all that, we'll check if the collider is the rope. Because if it is the rope, then we are going to increase the score. So from the game manager, we will get its score and increase that score by 1. So that will be with a plus equals. In this case, it'll be a int that it increases it by. So you can right click on this and set to default to be able to get the value and just type it in. So increase it by 1 and set it. And so now, because we made this a property, as soon as we set that score, that will automatically run all of this script. So we don't have to like send out another function or anything like that. It just does it when it's set. So on our character, we need to make sure that we've referenced the rope here, which the collider is on this collision jump rope. And fingers crossed that everything here is working as intended. So as long as it is, we should be able to jump and increase our score. And that was the worst first jump I've ever achieved. But see, now we've fallen and the game isn't restarting. For this, we're going to create a game component, uNode component that can just be easily attached to anything by itself. So this will be a trigger restart. Just double click on that and simply make sure to rename it here, trigger restart. As soon as this is triggered by anything, which will only be the character, then we are going to simply restart the level. So for this, we're going to get scene manager, scene manager, yes. And right click on that, and then we will load the scene with the int scene build index, and we will just get the scene manager. I'm not having very good success typing in spelling scene manager. And get the active scene. And from that, we will get the build index. So that will just, so this is, we know what scene it is. It's 0 scene. There's only one scene, but this is so that if you had a project wherever this trigger restart is and whatever game object it's attached to, it will restart whatever level you happen to be in. So for that, all we need to do is drag it on to the trigger restart, which is an object I've already set up. So that's just this object out here. So now when I fail on my first jump and fall off, we should be restarting the scene. And that is the game. The only other thing that you might want to do is you'll see in in this scene that as soon as the rope hits, you fall head first very quickly. To adjust that over in our character, we can, in the awake step, get the rigid body and set manually its center of gravity. So what we're going to do is get this and the game object and the reference to a rigid body component rigid body, and then its center of mass. We're going to set that to 0.5 in the y-axis. Just place fit nodes fixes everything. Now it's important that because we've set this in the awake on our character, we need to make sure that we set that the uNode runtime will actually initialize on awake Otherwise, this step wouldn't run. So now, if I intentionally fail horribly and do nothing, they'll just simply get pushed around much more uh, uh, chaotically and better than just falling headfirst. But that is the game complete. You've made your first little thing with uNode, so hopefully this helped. Well done, through to the end.